this dawned on me a couple years ago when I saw a study that found that sunscreens, chemical sunscreens, chemical sunscreens might pose their own risks, right? The oxybenzones or the avobenzones I know have been highlighted as potential endocrine disruptors. But this study found for the first time that these chemicals are not inert. They, when exposed to sun, when exposed to chlorine in pools, they transform into completely different chemicals that pose their own set of risks that are, understudied. Huge knowledge gap for us. What are they doing to our children? These novel chemicals that these compounds convert to. I mean, we assume that chemicals, we spread them on our bodies, they're inert, hopefully they're safe, but we seldom consider how these chemicals are interacting with, these other exposures, whether it's UV rays from the sun, chlorine in our pools.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because it's like, okay, well, if I inject it into a rat, well, first of all, it's supposed to go on your skin. So if you're injecting it, how is that relevant? Secondly, like you said, photoactivation by the sun, that's a huge problem. There's heat, so many different elements. Nobody knows how these chemicals are reacting. They just see it in the vacuum of, oh, well, we spray it on the skin, it should be fine. Again, it's the issue that we're facing is the synthetic chemicals. It's not the historically used chemicals or compounds that our ancestors used, because what's missing is the context of a history of safe human use. When you have that history, then we know we are the ultimate test subject. If our ancestors were using it with very little to no harm, then that's pretty clear indication that it's probably not an issue. But it's also scale. The amount that's being released into the environment, the amount that's flooding the marketplace, that's also at the core of the problem.
What kind of sunscreen do you use for yourself and your kids?
I actually use zinc oxide based. I have some that are made out of tallow. That's interesting. That's a really interesting one. But other ones that are just made out of organic ingredients that you can find, I think at Sprouts or any health food store, you can find these kind of sunscreen products. But I would look for non-nano zinc oxide.
Non-nano zinc oxide.
And non-aerosol. This is very important. I know that aerosol sunscreens are very convenient, but the problem is that when you apply them, if you've ever seen anyone spraying sunscreen on their body, most of it's going into the air. It's not landing on their skin. It's not evenly distributed. So are you even getting adequate protection? You end up spraying a whole lot. It poses an inhalation risk. And years ago, not that long ago, thousands of aerosol products were recalled because of benzene contamination. Benzene is a human carcinogen via the route of inhalation. And why it was in these products, likely because of the petroleum-based propellants that were used.
Benzene is in cigarette smoke.
Yes, and also candles, conventional candles.
Wow.
So we don't need to be inhaling benzene. If you can avoid it, that's best. I think that's best. With aerosol sunscreen, even if it's mineral-based, we don't need to inhale zinc oxide. We can spread it on our skin in a cream-based formula. That's absolutely fine.
Okay, gotta dip into the world of organic versus conventional. This is a very controversial topic on social media, although I don't think it should be. Organic versus not organic. Is it worth it? Is organic worth it?
In my opinion, yes. Because low-level exposures to pesticides, let's say prenatally, have been shown to have neurotoxic effects in children. So there's neurobehavioral effects, cognitive defects in kids whose parents consume foods that were pesticide treated, versus organic foods prohibit certain types of pesticides, and therefore just the burden already on the consumer is less. And not only that, but on the environment, what's getting washed down into the water system, into the soil, and also for the occupational workers that don't have to spray these toxic chemicals on food and wear hazmat suits.
Yeah, occupational exposure to herbicides and pesticides is it's crazy, the connection now being made between certain herbicides like paraquat and rotenone and Parkinsonism. These are human health outcomes that are understudied in the setting of these herbicides and pesticides. A lot of the emphasis is placed on cancer, but there's a whole host of other conditions that might be triggered by chronic exposure occupationally to these herbicides and pesticides. But critics will say, well, organic, when you consume organic is not a guarantee that you're not being exposed to pesticides. There are still certain pesticides that are organic approved. Organic is not more nutritious than conventional. How do you respond to those critics?
Well, I just look at the evidence, look at the data. Just look at what the regulations are supposed to do for us. Just look at what is in the National Organic Program. What's outlined, what's not allowed are synthetic fertilizers, synthetic chemicals, and GMOs, right? And I think that people can argue whatever they want. At the end of the day, eating a diet of whole, unprocessed foods, even if it's conventional, by far trumps anything that's processed. Even if it's organic, even if the ingredients are immaculate, it doesn't matter. The process of manufacturing processed foods introduces toxins, period, end of story. No argument there. But when it comes to organic versus conventional whole foods, if you can afford it, organic is the way to go. Not just, like I mentioned, on the consumer, but also on the environment and on the occupational exposure. And there's even evidence that people who live near agricultural areas have higher incidence of things like respiratory disorders, neurotoxic problems. So there are conditions that are associated with just being in proximity, not even consuming them.
It's scary.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.